Hey everyone, what's good? Jubita is back with a special video for y'all, and we're back talking about the Akatsuki. Now some of you channel veterans might think that I've covered this topic before in a previous video of mine, that being the Akatsuki inner dynamics. However, there's a huge distinction, because in that other video, I focused on exploring the dynamics between all of the Akatsuki members. And in this rendition, I'll be strictly focusing on the dynamics between each Akatsuki duo, because the Akatsuki duos are some of the most iconic duos in all of shonen, and most of them have complex relationships. And each duo pairs similar yet contrasting members. You could almost say that the duo characters were almost foils to each other. They each had their parallels, but also their stark differences that made them butt heads from time to time. And these dynamics are so interesting that I figured that they deserve a full-fledged video. Today, I'll look at the three main Akatsuki duos, and then I'll also briefly look at the older duos and the leadership duos of the Akatsuki as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to subscribe if this ain't your first rodeo, and let's get straight to it. Now, it goes without saying that the Akatsuki's leadership was very methodical in how they paired up Akatsuki members. The reason the Akatsuki operated in pairs in the first place was that the manpower of two Akatsuki members was usually more than enough to handle most of the war contracts that were assigned to them, and it was also definitely enough to ensure that the Jinchuriki hunt goes smoothly, considering that each Akatsuki member is roughly Bijou level. On top of that, it wasn't just about pairing up random members together. The Akatsuki duos are always paired up in a way that each member's individual abilities complement each other, and I think that Kishimoto put a lot of effort behind each duo. They all had some common and contrasting characteristics. For example, if we start with the first duo of our analysis, Deidara and Sasori, they are known as the artistic duo because both of them are artists in their own right. However, as many of you can tell, they both have opposing definitions of what true art is. According to Deidara, true art was a fleeting flash of beauty burning brightly and vanishing in a heartbeat, while Sasori believed that art was a work of beauty that could be captured and kept for eternal prosperity. And of course, each one of their art definitions is reflective of their respective characteristics and their combat abilities. Deidara's younger, more impulsive, and occasionally hot-headed personality, as well as all his C-variant explosives, completely aligned with his definition of art, while Sasori's more patient and reserved nature, as well as his puppets that remained in use way past his departure and death, and even his puppet body that reserved his youth and beauty for eternity, perfectly mirrored his definition. Both artists defined their styles and their jutsu as what true art was. Now, while they both strongly disagreed with what the other perceived, that didn't really prevent them from working together efficiently. Deidara actually had a lot of respect for Sasori even if he disagreed with him. He still saw him as a sort of mentor, and he even used honorable titles when referring to him, because Sasori was a renowned and legendary artistic shinobi whose inventions remained in use in the sand for decades. While Deidara was the youngest member of the Akatsuki and Sasori's junior. Sasori, on the other hand, while he tolerated Deidara's antics and kind of got along with him, he occasionally expressed annoyance with him and saw him as childish or reckless at times, which makes sense. Recklessness was a part of Deidara's fighting style, which consisted of large-scale explosions, which contrast with Sasori's more subtle arsenal, like his sand brainwash jutsu, which allowed him to host a large network of spies, or his paralysis poison, down to their styles in how Deidara shows up on a massive bird and makes a huge scene, while Sasori remains hidden within his Hiroko puppet and most people don't even know what his true form looks like, which is part of what makes them foils for each other, like the other Akatsuki duos. Combined, Deidara and Sasori were a rather destructive force, and they were likely the deluxe duo package that a client got when they wanted a large-scale operation like the invasion of a village, with Deidara's aerial barrage and his domination of the sky, combined with Sasori's numbers in the 100 puppets and his tricks and poisons. Their abilities also paired rather well with each other, as Sasori was the only companion other than Pain or Toby that wouldn't be affected by Deidara's ultimate move, the C4 Karura, since as a human puppet Sasori did not breathe and hence would be unaffected. So that's another proof of this duo's arsenal's compatibility. Now, Sasori was usually cold and depressed and hollow, and I wouldn't say that he showed affection towards Deidara, though the opposite could be argued, as Deidara seemed visibly upset when Sasori's soul started releasing as he gained closure from Kankuro and the mother and father puppet. So you could say Deidara did subtly care for his partner, even if he didn't like to display it. Or maybe he just didn't want to remain a reanimated zombie fighting alone. Though now that we've covered these two, let's move on to the Halloween pairing. Also known as the Immortal Duo or the Zombie Combo, Hidan and Kakuzu, who have the most entertaining back and forth of any duo in my opinion. They have a slightly similar dynamic to Deidara and Sasori in that their duo nickname correlates to their identity. They're called the Immortal Duo since the both of them have a form of pseudo-immortality. They also have slightly similar dynamics to the previous duo in that one member, Hidan, is more of a young buck that looks up to the other elder and more experienced or serious member as a pioneer in the field of immortality. It's even stated in the databook that Hidan made up his mind to join the Akatsuki because of a man named Kakuzu that would live forever who was his predecessor. So even if Hidan made disrespectful remarks to Kakuzu, he actually respected him, or at least respected his skills deep down. He held Kakuzu to a higher standard than himself, which is why he scolded him when the both of them got caught in Shikamaru's trap, saying, "How could you allow yourself to get caught as well?" So even Hidan put Kakuzu's skills on a higher pedestal than his own. Kakuzu, on the other hand, saw Hidan in a similar light as Sasori to Deidara, albeit with even more annoyance and contempt. The thing is, just like the artistic duo, despite the fact that Hidan and Kakuzu shared some similarities, being immortals and all, their personal beliefs were completely opposing. They were also perfect foils. Hidan was a pious person. He believed in a higher power, Jashin, which granted him the gift of immortality, and he dedicated his life to the cause. He believed in honoring thy neighbor, and that he was doing those a favor when he sacrificed them to Jashin in his ritual. So he was quite religious, in contrast with Kakuzu, who was a lot more interested in earthly or materialistic possessions like money or capital. And even when the duo attacked the fire temple, Hidan noted that killing a monk for profit was a ticket to damnation, to which Kakuzu responds that even hell runs on cash. And that pissed off Hidan even more because the idea of trading a human being's life for money was just no way for people to behave according to Hidan. It was blasphemous. He saw Kakuzu as a selfish sinner and unbeliever, while Kakuzu saw Hidan's long-winded religious rituals as a nuisance and a waste of time. Both Hidan and Kakuzu were from the smaller nations, and they both abandoned their hidden villages but for completely opposing reasons. While Hidan abandoned the hidden steam because they were restructuring the village into a touristic natural springs hotspot for profits, and abandoning their shinobi ways and their soldiers, Kakuzu deserted his village after they punished him for failing to live up to their high expectations of a shinobi. They both did, however, have a similar exit by massacring their former comrades before going rogue, which is another foil aspect. Now, while they both display nothing but animosity towards each other on the surface, I believe that they both deep down at least slightly cared about each other, with Kakuzu going through the hassle of bringing Hidan's headband along so he could hide his neck stitches and believing that a brat like Shikamaru would stand no chance in a 1v1 against Hidan, and Hidan showing a lot of concern for Kakuzu when he was about to strike him while possessed with Shikamaru's jutsu. They may have shared different beliefs and prioritized different things, but they were still partners. They also had the best teamwork of any Akatsuki duo, and were likely the most duo that operated together. Hidan, despite his lack of interest in profits, was actually the perfect partner for Kakuzu, and even Kakuzu himself acknowledged that, because while Kakuzu had the habit of killing his partners, Hidan was unkillable, and they even used that as a strategy in battle. Hidan would basically engage the opponent in close quarters combat, and then Kakuzu would blast and engulf the both of them with a large-scale elemental attack, and Hidan, being an immortal, would come out unscathed. So despite the fact that they were always bickering and throwing jabs at each other, even threatening each other, and the fact that they shared completely opposing beliefs, I believe that deep down they had a solid partnership. And next up we got Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki, the comrade-killing duo, and the first Akatsuki duo to make an appearance on screen. Itachi and Kisame, like the other duos, are sort of foils to each other as well, in that they share similarities and stark differences that contrast them from each other. The both of them were tools for their states. They were both used to slaughter their own comrades for the supposed greater good. but their experiences led them to have completely opposing beliefs and loyalties towards the end. After Itachi had completed his assignment by massacring his own clan, putting Sasuke on the Avenger path, and then joining the Akatsuki to be a spy for Konoha, despite the guilt and regret that he felt, he still believed that protecting the village was the utilitarian good. While Kisame, on the other hand, after being used to kill his fellow mist delegates to prevent intel from being leaked to the enemy, he felt completely disillusioned after he found out that his superior Fuguki was secretly colluding with the enemy, which kinda undoes the whole reason that Kisame killed his own comrades. That left Kisame feeling like he was trapped in a false existence, which is why Obito stepped out of the shadows and revealed himself to Kisame, to free him from this illusion and show him the truth behind the Mist's leadership. After that, Kisame rejected the village because of its two-faced nature. Not to say that he thought the Akatsuki were fully righteous, but at least they were honest with their intentions, and Kisame fully embraced his role as an irredeemable agent of chaos that would at least help usher in a true and peaceful world. The infinite Tsukuyomi, which is a contrast with how Itachi still held on to his faith in the village system and saw it as preferable to the chaotic preceding era. This duo also acts as a foil in their relationship to the behind-the-scenes leader Obito. They both were personally recruited by him, but they differed in how Itachi was the member Obito trusted the least because of his alignment to Konoha, and Kisame was the one he trusted the most. And the reason that he paired Itachi up with Kisame was because he wanted his most loyal subordinate to keep an eye on Itachi and ensure that he didn't betray the organization. Not to mention that Kisame had wholeheartedly accepted his role as a depraved mass murderer that was hopeless, that this was in his nature. While Itachi believed that humans were a lot more nuanced and that even those that committed horrid acts weren't completely doomed or beyond saving. That one did not know what type of man he was until death, since that's the moment that one cannot change course anymore and becomes absolute in history. Itachi may have given up on himself being a force of good, but he put his faith into Sasuke, with Sasuke's first steps being to avenge the Uchiha clan by killing the Kinslayer, and Kisame finally understands and agrees with Itachi's words at his moment of death, when he looks at his final actions of self-sacrifice in order to prevent leakage of intelligence against his comrades, and his noble death would prove that he wasn't just some irredeemable scum as he initially thought. Now going back to Itachi and Kisame, and despite the fact that they were paired up together to keep an eye on each other, so they should have been the most distrustful, they surprisingly enough had mutual respect. Kisame in particular had huge respect for Itachi. He usually took his well-being into consideration, like when he offered to capture the Four Tails alone, or when he checked up on him and gave his condolences when he thought that Deidara killed his brother. And Kisame usually listened to Itachi's words. As long as Itachi wasn't turning on the Akatsuki, Kisame maintained loyalty to him. And Itachi, despite seeing Kisame as a thug, also acknowledged that Kisame wasn't as depraved as the other Akatsuki members. He also seemed to be visibly upset when he was revived in the war when he saw Bee with the Samehara and acknowledged that Kisame was likely dead. Now, it's a bit harder to assess their teamwork. I'm sure they worked well together, though maybe they didn't have the same synergy as Hidan and Kakuzu, or at least it's unlikely that the two of them have ever had to go all out together, considering that the both of them were very high caliber shinobi, and one of them was usually more than enough for the task at hand. For example, this is the same duo that was chosen by Pain to act as a distraction for both Team Kakashi and Team Guy, while the Akatsuki extracted the Shukaku from Gaara. There was this one scene in the Akatsuki Hiden novel where the duo was confronted by the Mist's Hunter-nin platoon that was after Kisame, and two of those Ambu were insect users that poisoned Kisame, and Itachi had to step in and help. But even then, Kisame started shaving off his own infected flesh and wasn't really incapacitated or anything. Considering that this duo was quite familiar with Tobi, it's likely that they were the special ops unit in the Akatsuki and were given more sensitive assignments like assassinations and intelligence gathering missions or whatnot. And overall, Itachi and Kisame had quite the interesting dynamic, which was shaped by mutual distrust, but also a bit of mutual respect and camaraderie. And now that we've tackled the main duos, and I call these duos the main ones because they were the ones created by the Akatsuki's leadership with efficiency in mind, though I suppose there are the more short-lived ones as well, like Orochimaru and Sasori, who, like the other duos, were also quite similar in a sense. Maybe not in terms of art, but in the fact that the both of them were sadistic geniuses that pursued some form of eternal life or perfection, and that the both of them were pseudo-immortals in a sense. Though you could argue that Orochimaru was the one that perfected immortality the most, and he outlived all the other Akatsuki members. Their similarity also extends to the fact that Sasori's human puppets and Orochimaru's reanimated shinobi were a very similar concept. Both used dead shinobi of the past to wage their wars. Sasori even sought out the reanimation jutsu that Orochimaru had perfected, and he held a grudge against Orochimaru when he betrayed the Akatsuki, and how he disrespected Sasori in doing so, which is why Sasori was out to get him. And he even had Orochimaru's closest subordinate, Kabuto, under his puppet brainwash jutsu in order to gather intel on the snake. And there's even some that believe that Sasori knew that Orochimaru had set up an ambush for him, since he also knew that Shura had turned traitor and was warning the Sand Village against the Akatsuki. One could even argue that since Sasori died prior to the meeting, that he didn't get the chance to undo the jutsu on Kabuto and have him revert to the original spy that he'd implanted, since Sasori didn't tell Sakura about the sand manipulation jutsu, and only once Sasori undid the jutsu did the spy regain consciousness of his original loyalty to Sasori. So who knows how that ambush would have went if the real Sasori showed up on the Tenchi Bridge. Next duo that was short-lived is Tobi and Deidara, and this one looks even more bizarre once you figure out Tobi's real identity. However, I believe that Obito created the whole Tobi persona just for Deidara. Despite some people thinking it was for Itachi, Itachi already knew there was a mysterious masked man that led the Akatsuki. Obito may have first pretended to be Tobi to hide in plain sight, but he really leaned into that role whenever Deidara was present. And the explanation behind this is likely that he may have wanted Deidara to be as efficient as he could, since Deidara was petty and particularly insecure when he was around an Uchiha with the Sharingan. So when Tobi pretends that he's inferior to Deidara and strokes his ego, this will cause Deidara to naturally act like the more senior member of the duo and carry out his duties as effectively as he could. Deidara also had a very destructive arsenal for his comrades, so Obito was one of the few that could be paired up with him. And Deidara, despite looking down at Tobi and his antics for the most part, did seem to somewhat care for him eventually, with how he'd warn him at times and even apologize for when he thought that he was ending him as well. However, we all know that it was all an act on Tobi's part, and he just saw Deidara as a useful tool for his ambitions back then. And now, the only duos that we truly have left are the leadership duos, and the reason that I didn't list them with the first three is because these weren't selected by the leadership for operational efficiency, but there are more so duos that were naturally paired up together. Pain and Conan, the divine duo, were both childhood friends that were part of the original Akatsuki and suffered the same wars in the Rain Village, with the figurehead leader, the Tendo Pain, being the corpse of Conan's significant other, and the puppet master Rinnegan wielder in the shadows controlling him being her close childhood friend that had been radicalized by the former's death. Just like how Nagato only wanted to protect two individuals, Conan said that the two most important ones to her were Yahiko and Nagato, and she followed each of their visions when they were alive. So when Nagato decided he was gonna ascend to the role of a god that forces the world to stop its warmongering ways, she decided to become his guardian angel. They both usurped power in the Hidden Rain and ruled it together. And Nagato remained hidden within his chambers and only used the pain bodies to deal with the outside world, and he used his beloved friend Yahiko's body the most. Conan remained loyal to Nagato, but she did have her concerns about Tobi and Zetsu, which is something more apparent in the Akatsuki Hiren novel. She even thought that Nagato was going overboard a bit and that the Akatsuki had strayed far from Yahiko's image after he became the new leader, though she mostly blamed the two new bandwagon hoppers. And her loyalty remained until Nagato changed course, and there's even some evidence to indicate that both of them were in on the plan to get rid of Obito, which is something that I've discussed in many of my previous videos, and I highly recommend to all those interested. Make sure to check them out. But that leaves us with only Tobi and Zetsu, the secret mastermind duo. And some will just make the two halves of Black and White Zetsu as a duo in itself, but I've always preferred this pairing. Now there isn't as strong of a bond here, since it's not likely that Obito viewed Zetsu as a friend or anything, and Zetsu's not even human to understand what those bonds are. They were both the duo left behind to execute Madara's plan, and Obito kinda saw Zetsu as his lieutenant or second in command. He could rely on Black Zetsu to record the events for him so that he could watch them later. He could rely on the White Zetsu's force to track Sasuke, or to take Kisame's place in the beef fight so that Kisame could infiltrate the Cloud Village. Of course though, Obito was blindsided to Zetsu's true motives, which even Madara didn't know, and while Obito saw himself as the mastermind working in the shadows using everyone, it was actually Zetsu that was just that, and Zetsu just let Obito think that he was the shot caller when he really wasn't. And the best example of that is how Obito didn't even want to revive Madara, but Zetsu went behind his back and led Kabuto to Madara's corpse so he could use it as a bargaining chip with Obito. So you could say that this duo was shaped by distrust and manipulation, as neither Obito, Madara, or even the audience could tell that it was this talking blob that was behind all the events of the series. Anyways, I think I've covered all the dynamics between each of the Akatsuki duos as is. Now, like I've mentioned before, if analysis or Akatsuki videos are your cup of tea, then boy did you come to the perfect channel. I've always considered myself to be the Akatsuki channel. I mean, even look at my banner. So if you want to get behind the Jubitas channel, then be sure to subscribe. And other than that, I think I've made my point. I'll see you next time. Bye.